Painting realistic fur can be quite difficult, especially in acrylics. In this video, I'm going to show you my techniques to make painting fur as easy as possible for you. If you've watched my channel before, you might have seen that I have done quite a few fur painting videos before. All of those methods for painting fur are absolutely fantastic and you should definitely go and check those out. The reason that I'm making a new video is because the way that I paint fur has changed slightly. That's because what I want my painting to look like has changed slightly. I used to want quite contrasting paintings, so I really pushed the darks and the lights. And for those kind of paintings, I'd start with a dark base and then work the lighter colours over the top. But now I want something a little different. I want my paintings to look a little bit brighter with some more subtle colour transitions. Starting with dark base coats was making it really hard to achieve those bright, vibrant colours that I now want in my work. So I've changed my fur painting technique slightly, and that's what I'm going to show you in this video. Instead of starting with really dark, opaque colours like I usually do, I'm using more transparent washes of colour over a pure white background. Painting on top of white allows the vibrancy of the colours to show through. When I was painting on top of the dark base layers, it was dulling and darkening all of the colours. So this new method allows everything to stay brighter and more colourful. I'm not thinking about shadows or highlights, I'm just picking up the base blocks of colour that I can see in my reference photo. I'm just concentrating on the large shapes and no detail at the moment. The most important part of painting isn't the details. It's about getting the form and the proportions right. You want what you're painting to look 3D, and you can do that by manipulating the light and the shadows. So the next step in my fur painting process is building up those areas that are gonna be in shadow. And again, I do this using thin washes of paint, nothing too thick or opaque. The paints that I'm using for this piece are these Liquitex professional heavy body acrylic paints. These are expensive acrylic paints. You do not need expensive acrylic paints to paint realistic work. I'm doing this because I went to a museum the other day and I saw all the paintings and how some of them were in sort of like a little bit of disrepair. They'd all yellowed, they hadn't aged very well, and I'm sort of starting to think about the archival quality of my paintings a little bit more and what they're going to look like, not in like a 10, 15, 20 years, but how they're going to look in hundreds of years. So I'm using better quality paint to hopefully preserve those paintings for as long as I can. You might notice that as I'm adding the shadows, I'm not going really dark with them. I'm still only really thinking about my middle values. The extreme lights and the shadows are going to be added sparingly towards the end. Also, the brushes that I'm using are from my Studio Wildlife brush sets, and if you want to pick up a set for yourself, I'll leave a link in the description, but hurry because there are only 33 sets left. We've nearly sold out, so if you want one, better act fast. I'm just going to say it again, details are the least important part of the process. If you've not got your proportions and values right first, then no amount of detail is going to make a painting great. You can make a much better painting with less detail, but really focus on creating a formful and accurate image. But we all know how easy it can be to get lost in the details, so I am going to show you how I do it. I'm still keeping my paint quite watery, so it's transparent and goes onto the canvas really smoothly. And I just start out looking at some of the lighter areas of the fur and picking out some of those lighter strands, using not my brightest lights, but pretty close. I study my reference photo closely, which I have provided for my Studio Wildlife patrons, as well as the full real-time tutorial for this mini painting. I'm looking for the colours in the different areas of my reference photo, and I start to add strands of fur in those colours. The paint is transparent, so it's watered down, so as I layer it, over those different colours underneath, it produces variation in the colour of those fur strands, so not everything is the same. I also leave plenty of gaps to allow those original base colours to show through. The fur also follows a general direction based on the reference photo, but I make sure to add some slight variations in the length, the thickness, and the slight curve of each strand. I can get slightly darker with my colours here, but I'm still not using my darkest darks. I'm just sort of in that like darker mid-value range. The true darks are going to be the next step. This is when I can add some of the darker sections of fur, and I start with a darker colour, quite transparent, and build up a few layers focusing on those shadowy areas, and adding in just a couple of strands in the lighter areas just to give the impression of textured layered fur. Then for the darkest sections of fur, I use thicker paint of the same colour, which means I don't water it down as much. The paint isn't applied thickly, so it's not like impasto, because I don't want thick textured effects to the shadows of the painting. But because I haven't used water, the colour is more opaque, darker, and more solid looking. I can use this technique to add details, but I can also use it to help establish the structure and that 3D form just a little bit more. Now we can start to think about the brightest parts of the fur. This is where I'll use more textured paint. I want the actual physical painting to catch the light wherever it's displayed. I want the brushstrokes to cast shadows over the painting. It helps to establish the form, but it also just adds a little bit of interest to the painting. To do this, I use more opaque paint to build up the lightest strands of fur. I'm careful not to add too much light, as it can be really easy to go overboard and wash out the subtlety of the transitions between the values. I want more subtle variation. I don't want super sharp contrasting lights and shadows. Don't worry if you go too bright, it can be easily fixed with this next step. Glazing is my favourite technique for painting. It's basically just applying very thin, transparent washes of colour over a dry painting to adjust the colours and the values, but keep the details showing through. I use glazes to knock back the bright white hairs, glazing a little bit of colour over them. Remember what I said at the start of the video? Colour over white helps to increase the vibrancy of that colour, so we can get vibrant details by doing glazes like this. I also use the glazes to unify the shadow areas. Shadows generally don't need as much detail as the highlights, so I will glaze some more darks over those shadows. This will cause the colours of the shadow areas to look more similar to each other, reducing the variation and also softening the shadows, reducing the details, which helps to create a more realistic finish to the fur. You don't want it all in super sharp focus. The best paintings have areas that are softer and areas that are sharper, which work together to lead the viewer's eye to the focal points of a painting. I will use these techniques for whatever animal I'm painting. So obviously sometimes the colours are different and sometimes the lengths or the direction of the fur is different, but the method stays the same. One of the other major skills for creating realistic paintings in acrylics is being able to blend. And there are 5 ways that we can blend. And if you'd like to know how I use those 5 techniques to create realistic paintings, then check out this video here. If you've enjoyed this video and you found it useful, then please do like, subscribe and comment on the video. And while you're at it, why not just go and binge watch all of the rest of the videos on my channel? As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.